Shall we start? Thank you very much, everybody. So welcome to this meeting of the Transport Committee for West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We're here in Leeds City Hall, and it's great to see everybody in person. Obviously, we've got to be careful about distancing and hand washing, etc. So let's all respect those social distancing measures for each other. So we have a meeting agenda in front of us, quite a lot to get through. Can we have apologies, etc.?
We've had apologies from Councillor Thornburg, Councillor Keith, Councillor Cunningham, Simon Pringle, Mark Roberts and Councillor Morley, Councillor Hayden and Councillor Alex Ross-Shaw, Chair.
Thank you very much, but we have some very valued members who are present today, and I'm very pleased to see you all. Any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest? No, as nobody indicating. If anything does occur to you during the meeting, do let me know. Please just put your hand up and we'll take that down. Exempt information, possible exclusion of the person public. I don't think there's anything on the agenda today which denotes that, is there?
No, there isn't, Chair.
Lovely, so it should be okay to hold everything on live stream. Minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee held on 2nd of July. Those have been circulated in these papers. Has anybody any corrections to make to those or any amendment? No. Can we accept those then as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Kaushik. I'm happy to have that as a seconder, and all those in favour please show. Lovely, thank you very much. So those are carried. So there's quite a number of meaty items on the agenda today, and it shows there's quite a lot of exciting things happening across the region for us to input into. The first item on the agenda is a City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. For once, it's an item which doesn't have a very catchy acronym to it, and I don't know about you, but I always struggle to get those letters in the right order. But the actual significance of it is substantial. Government has given us a very small timetable to get this bid in, so it went in, was it last week or the week before? But it's for a significant amount of money to make a significant amount of change across the region, and we're hoping we'll be successful. So, James, do you want to present this paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper updates the committee on the development of West Yorkshire's City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement bid. The bid was submitted on the 10th of September. The settlement is a five-year one starting next financial year and ending in 26-27. The Secretary of State for Transport set out two funding bands for West Yorkshire, low and high, ranging from circa £500 million to circa £900 million, with the amount depending on bid quality. It's worth saying that the funding is tight. The West Yorkshire bid is founded in the Connectivity Infrastructure Plan, with delivery of a mass transit system central to the thinking behind the bid. Once a settlement has been agreed with government, a prioritisation process to develop a programme-level business case will be required. We are expecting an outcome at the Comprehensive Spending Review at the end of October. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So you'll see in the papers that actually there's a range of options we could get with this. It could go to 920 million, I believe, and down to, what's the lowest point, 300 and something? Oh, 500 million. So even low is quite high. However, we all know that transport projects take a huge amount of investment and time to deliver, and some of these projects will be transformational for us. And of course, mass transit is in here, which is, I think, really exciting. Now we've got a mayor, we should be able to develop a mass transit system. It is something that's going to take a number of years, perhaps 5-10 years to develop, even more perhaps, but to really get that connectivity, intra-regional connectivity, I think will make us all more prosperous and enable people to access economic opportunities a lot easier. So any questions or comments on this? I've got Councillor Bolt and Councillor Buckley. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Picking up on the point that you mentioned at the end there, mass rapid transit, could I ask that WICA, if they haven't already, begin to have an overview of the potential impacts on one of the MRT corridors, which is the Dewsbury to Bradford that was intimated. One potential corridor of that is using what's now the Spen Valley Greenway, the former rail line and former Transperience route, which we have an expression of interest in Kirklees next door from a distribution warehouse, as it's been termed, Amazon, as many people are calling it, which impacts on the red line boundary, impacts on the mass rapid transit corridor. Clearly, we don't want that to impact what may come in the future with MRT and also with sustainable transport, because if that development does in any way encroach on that former rail corridor, it will negatively impact on a successful project. The other aspect of this report, tackling climate emergency 3.1, is supporting carbon reduction. And again, I think the Transport Committee and WICA ought to look at major schemes to ensure that they are supporting carbon reduction. Where there's a lot of concern in Kirklees to the A629, the Huddersfield to Outlane route, which is seeing the sacrifice of many mature trees, which of late Kirklees' own tree officer has come out in objection to, and where we were told in council by Councillor McBride that he's planning for a 2% increase in traffic on that route, which, contrary to everything that WICA are doing, where we're talking about reducing both car-borne traffic by 21% according to the CERP, Hgv, etc. But if routes are being designed at Kirklees level to increase traffic, that seems to be contrary to what we talk about here and elsewhere about carbon reduction, traffic reduction, etc. And I think there needs to be that left hand knowing what the right hand's doing. But so with climate emergency, carbon, and also the impact of MRT, if we could ask officers at WICA to keep an overview of that and making sure it's not adversely impacting on our priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the routes on the mass transit, they're still to be defined. This is a long period, a piece of work. I mean, the ones I've seen just thought about in Bradford, not actually defined yet, are multiple. You can go lots of different ways, of course. So I don't think there's any danger yet, Councillor Bolton. I appreciate you sort of flagging that early on. And I just seem to remember recently we've been doing quite a lot of, I've had a lot of presentations about bus improvement, bus corridors in Huddersfield and Dewsbury, was it? I mean, Councillor Groves, do you want to just come in on that and just reassure Councillor Bolt that actually Kirklees has quite a lot going on at the moment for bus improvement?
There is so much so that when the bid come forward, we sent it back and said that we weren't satisfied that there was enough in for Kirklees in terms of bus priority and to get that modal shift. So the bid went up by 10 million for Kirklees to ensure that, you know, we are putting up those interventions in for modal shifts. Councillor Hgv is quite right. There's a lot of work to be done on mass transit, and the biggest thing that, you know, the biggest threat we've got is we've got to get the route right, but we've got to get the business case right. We can't be seen to fail on this one.
Yes, indeed. You can't have a routing that goes nowhere for nobody. It's got to have a revenue with it as well. I mean, and I know Councillor Firth has been in those meetings and pushing the bus improvement. Councillor Firth, did you want to come in on that about bus improvement?
Yeah.
We've got it. Thank you very much. As Martin and Kim and our officers are aware, there's lots of major road schemes at the planning stage, at the consultant stage in Kirklees. And these will all be done very carefully, and we'll listen to the people that do make representations in that consultation. Buses are a priority in Kirklees, though some of the roads in Kirklees are very narrow and it will be very difficult, but where bus priorities can be put in, we will. But don't forget we've got the traffic signalling, which was being promoted at WICA for quite a few years now, and will be very useful in those very tight spots. As for Councillor McBride is not here to reply to Martin, but he gave a very good reply at the last council meeting. I'm sure that Martin took it all on board. Of course, he listened, and Peter's projection to our officers. Well, we'll have to see where that leads us. But I'm sure Martin will continue to make a contribution back at the office. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. And it was just in the nature of a comment, really. And in the sort of cross-party spirit of this committee, that this funding bid obviously talks about enormous, potentially huge sums of money, which might well flow into this region. And I just wondered whether it was worth putting on record the fact that whilst the bid is being put together to try to pull all the strands together of what we need and what we say that we need and want, we've actually got the most unbelievable situation with uncertainty as to major traffic things which are in the government's court. And for instance, the eastern leg of HS2, the uncertainty over the airport here in Leeds, where, if you remember, planning permission was granted for a new state-of-the-art eco-terminal and a railway halt, etc., and that's now in a state of uncertainty. Presumably the HS2 station work in Leeds would be affected by an eastern leg cancellation. Northern Powerhouse Rail, and now we hear about East Coast Main Line delays until 2023, which I read the other day. And it was just really to put this on record as I'm not trying to attack the government, but I think it's very difficult, it seems to me, in my view, to put forward a bid which encapsulates everything we need when there are so many uncertain major facts.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Absolutely agree, particularly about HS2, MPR, you know, there's crucial decisions for the region. But I think we'll come on to that a little bit later in the agenda because we've got a Leeds City Region transport update, and obviously there's a few of the schemes you outlined there that I'm sure other members will want to comment on, but I don't want to sort of preempt that. But there is a potential here for a huge amount of improvements in transport, as you rightly suggest. You know, £920 million would be wonderful if we could get that higher scenario. The lower scenario just doesn't give us the same kind of clout, and I would hope that government will see that we as a new mayoral combined authority who've got a real grand vision for what we want to achieve for all our residents across the region will back us in that endeavour. So I think if any of us get opportunity, including yourself, Councillor Buckley, to back our bid and to say that it's important that investment comes through, then all so much the better. I'm not sure when the announcement's going to be made, James. Do you know what the timetable for decision is?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So around the time of the comprehensive spending review, so 27th of October.
Okay, so there's quite a lot riding on that 27th of October, isn't it? And I think we're all putting our best foot forward, not just on this decision, but decisions about local government funding as well to try and get the settlement that we need. So we'll pick up some of those other issues, Councillor Buckley, later on in the agenda, if that's okay. Anything else on this agenda item? No? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, James, for that. Moving on then to another meaty issue, actually, which is really important for a lot of the communities that we represent, which is a bus service improvement plan. Dave, do you want to just pick up there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We brought you up to speed at the last meeting with the requirement that the government have imposed on all local transport authorities to submit by the end of October, 2 days after the spending review, a bus service improvement plan to government, which sets out what the region's ambitions are in terms of recovering bus patronage following the pandemic, but also growing the modal share of buses. And as you'll see with the report, the Minister in charge of buses is encouraging local transport authorities to show their ambition regarding bus services. So we're in the process of developing the bus service improvement plan as we speak, and we've been doing quite a lot of engagement with a variety of different people, with bus operators obviously, but with also other people who represent users of buses, people who rely upon buses, and business and other people. So we've got a really tight timescale to do this. We've got to bring everything together into a bus service improvement plan, which will go to the combined authorities meeting the 21st of October, so that we've got a plan we can submit by the end of the month. So the report in front of you is setting out where we're getting to, essentially, and offering you as members an opportunity to feed into their process as well. So in 2.10, we set out what the current thinking across each of the major work streams of the plan are, and happy to take any questions or for members to raise any issues that they want to make sure are reflected in the bus service improvement plan. So I'll stop there, and if you've got any points or questions you want to raise, then we'll record them, not just with the minutes of this meeting, but we'll use them as pointers to the sort of construction of this plan, which we'll be sharing with members, and we'll be circulating to Transport Committee members in October.
Thank you, Dave. So I feel we had a really good session on this as a working group, didn't we? A lot of us looking around the room were in that, about what we'd like to see in a bus service improvement plan, and some of that was around ticketing, fares, obviously customer service is really important with this. Obviously we want members of the public to feel an improvement. I think there is a bit of a challenge at the moment, isn't there, because there's not as much fares going through bus companies, and therefore some services are struggling a little bit, and I'd like to think that this bus improvement plan would lead to an overall improvement and not just a status quo.
Yes, I think that's one of the challenges that we faced here, because the pandemic has had a major impact on the economy of bus services, so it's both an opportunity to rebuild things in a stronger way, but there's also the threat of the fact that the money flowing through the system isn't what it was, because as a report later on, bus patronage is still at best 2/3 of what it used to be 2 years ago.
Thank you. So obviously a lot of people have already said what they want to go in this, but please do, if there's anything in here you think your views have not been added, do let us know now. Councillor Groves, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just a couple of things. And just on the network, I thought it had been agreed by the government that actually the bus service network should be maintained. Connectivity to serve communities in this last round of funding that was announced, so we shouldn't be seeing any sort of shrinkage of the network because of that condition. So a couple of things I just wanted to point out, and we've all been quite heavily involved in the work. The turn up and go on major routes, and bearing in mind that we have got services and communities, especially rural communities, and actually in cities, areas that, you know, because of the big part that the cars played and the patronage has dropped, that those communities have been left behind with very few services. So I think we need to make sure that they're included in the bid. So to put a turn up and go on major routes, I'm not quite sure that that's hitting the mark for the public, especially if you've got an hour service and that bus doesn't turn up. You're highly likely to be stood there for a turn up and go. Also, in terms of the flexibus, which we'll come on to later, that we're making sure the areas like Calderdale and Outer Wakefield, that we're putting something down about a new model for places like Calderdale and Wakefield, because we know that the model that they've got at this moment doesn't actually work. So we need to be quite ambitious, and I think Baroness Fear has stated that this is an opportunity to do something different. And we've actually got hold of the pen for once, and I know we've got an operator in the room, but I think we do really need to put down that West Yorkshire will be the place that trials these new models. And one example I'll give you, there's an opportunity in the Castleford-Wakefield area, which should speak to government, that actually you could work with the operators to realign services to meet the timetable of the train, which gives you real modal shift and real ambition. So I think we just need to, officers can't always put it in a report, but I want to see that type of ambition in there and get people out of cars. That's the main thing.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Thank you for all the work you've put into this as well. So I know you're continuing to spend a lot of time making sure bus services are improved. I'll go to Councillor Scully and then go back to Dave for answers on that.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Groves has stolen some of what I was going to say, and thank you for saying what you did, because I may have missed it, but there is a gap in this report, which is a reference to the rural and semi-rural bus services, which is important, I think, in different ways to all of our communities. It's important to us in Calderdale because we want thriving towns, our market towns to be thriving, and connectivity is absolutely crucial to that. We are very interested in demand-responsive transport, and we will be interested to see the results of the East Leeds experiment with that. But we really need to think ahead. We need to think in terms of digital and modern services. We've learned a lot during the pandemic, and we've learned to be adaptable and flexible. So I think actually we can turn some of that adaptability to rural and semi-rural bus services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scullin. I've got Councillor Sutherland, but I'll come back to his question, but if you want to add to those two. So particularly about the rural, semi-rural question, because obviously, I mean, we've all got a lot of big, vast rural areas. Bradford is 2/3 rural, I keep reminding people. And that turn up and go viability?
Absolutely, yes. And I apologise, actually. I'm just looking at the report. I think it's a bit jargony, isn't it, when we talk about secondary and community networks, what we really mean.
How, that's incredible that an officer should put jargon in the report.
Oh, sorry, yes. Guilty. When we say improve consistency of secondary and community networks, I think we very much mean the rural services, and as Councillor Grove said, also those areas that are both urban and rural that are served by hourly services or less frequent services. And I think that's what's intended there, is that it's important that we maintain a network to communities and keep those communities connected to the public transport network. So I think we can, and we already do, subsidise quite a lot of route services in rural areas. I think there's a challenge here as to how do we actually evolve and grow that and do that better, and are there other ways of delivering services such as demand responsive, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the meeting. In terms of Councillor Groves' comment about turn up and go, I think one of the things we do need to be mindful of is that there's a healthy balance between the urban corridors where there are even during the pandemic there are reasonably healthy numbers of people travelling to and from, and they not only sort of create the use and demand for bus services, they actually help the wider sort of financial economy of the bus service. So and what everybody is generally in agreement with is that if a bus service runs every 10 minutes or more frequently, then people don't need to refer to timetables. They will just walk to the road and catch the bus. So we need to balance those well-used routes and the routes that are less sort of frequent but more important for communities. So I think we're trying to get that balance in this plan, but I think it's a fair call to make sure that we emphasise the importance of bus services, particularly to market towns and others.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Scullion's already given the plug for Calderdale and demand-responsive transport, and I do think it's important for rural areas, but I think it will potentially have an impact across the board, across West Yorkshire and other places. In a world where people are becoming increasingly used to being able to order a taxi, food, or pretty much anything to your door, our standard operating model is starting to look quite outdated in terms of what we expect of people when they're using the bus network. So I hope that this really promotes some innovation that could be used in all sorts of areas. What I wanted to do was make a plug for a part that I think is often missing. I'm not sure it needs to go in here, but I think it needs mentioning, which is the workforce in the bus service network, and about the importance of having well-trained, consistent staff, hopefully with lower staff turnover than we're getting, working shifts that work for them, because I think that having that workforce working for the service and working for them is what will increase the punctuality, the reliability of a lot of our buses. And I think that there's a good chunk of the problems that we face in the network that may come from staffing issues. And I think the past 18 months has made almost every sector reflect on how important staff are to every service that they run.
I think that's an excellent point, isn't it, really, because that impacts absolutely on the service that the customer receives. And people should have flexible working practices in the workplace. They should have good rates of pay so we can attract the best people as well. So We've heard a lot about Hgv drivers. I'm sure bus drivers are similarly affected, and those public service workers are somebody we've really come to depend on. Is that something that can be tackled in this plan?
It is, and I was going to give an update on that later on the agenda. But I think Councillor Sutherland makes an excellent point. I think the effect on unemployment throughout the pandemic are caused partly by the pandemic, but it's just brought into focus the fact that none of the things we write into this report will work without frontline staff to deliver them, and I think that's a very valid point, and one that we do need to both make to government, because this plan's an odd thing. It's both a bidding document to government for a share of £3 billion that we believe is available for improving bus services, but it's also going to set a bit of a template for how we want to carry forward the region's plans around its bus service into an enhanced partnership and possibly franchising, if that's the direction of travel that's chosen beyond that. So I think the workforce issue is very pertinent, and one we will ensure we identify. We're probably going to identify the problem more than all of the solutions in this plan, if I'm honest, but that's definitely one to include.
So I'm going to bring Councillor Salam in a minute, but obviously a lot of these issues that are identifying are things that I'm sure you're bringing up, Councillor Groves, with your bus operators network that you talk to on a regular basis.
Yeah, they are. We have regular meetings, and I think pre the shortage of drivers, there was an industrial dispute in Manchester that was resolved because of better pay and conditions coming forward when they changed over to Go Ahead. So there's a lot of best practice to look at out there. I'm surprised in terms, and I would like to see the detail of how many drivers we are short from every operator, because I wouldn't want, I'm sure it wouldn't be used as an excuse, but I wouldn't want services that are performing very well to suddenly start to be disappearing or be, dropping off the network on the back of we haven't got enough drivers. I'd like to see that hard evidence, if I'm honest. So, because there's a lot of routes that, I've been down at Transport, have just been pulled, and community roads are left behind. So I think we need the facts and the figures on this one.
Chair, would it be useful if I do give the update on that particular issue now? I was going to give it against the network update paper, but I can. Okay, it's no problem.
Thank you, Chair. I think Dan touched up on a very important point here. Is that most of our network and most of our practices are actually being seen as outdated because of the new ways of actually now the world is evolving. However, I think what Kim and Dan was talking about is staff shortage. There is a massive staff shortage at this moment of time. Services are actually being dropped. There is a lot of drivers that are actually now rethinking, especially in the transport sector, bus services sector. The last that we actually saw was that first of 500 to 600 drivers short, or even around 1,000 drivers short nationally. This is, and so are other operators. They are actually all finding it difficult. And when we talk about making the industry attractive to new entrants, is I think also now going to be seen as outdated, because we've got to make the industry attractive for those people who are employed in the industry. Because if you don't make it attractive for them, then they are just going to leave. And that's what is happening at this moment of time. People have actually now started to realise, through the 2 years of pandemic, that because the hours were reduced, because people were furloughed, people had more time with their families, people had more time to do other things and prioritise other things that they actually never even thought about. Therefore, and currently, I mean, we are seeing that a lot of the services are actually now going to be
re-registered from 10 to 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, so a lot of services are going to be dropped. And connectivity, when we talk about connectivity, Dave, is the most important thing, because it's not just bus services about main corridors, it's about communities. It's about those states and workplaces and the important places like hospitals and others that where we need to see good and improved bus services. So, you know, I just wanted to sort of just allude on that. And then the second thing also is the information part of it for the customers. Because currently we see the displays on the bus stops and the bus stations where it says the next bus is going to be here in 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes. But that is the timetable time. There is no real-time information. When we talk about real-time information, if there is a disruption on that route, it doesn't actually tell the passengers that there is a disruption on that route, that bus is going to be missing. I mean, currently, if you have a look, there is from Bradford to Leeds, the 72 and the X6 services are actually massively disrupted because there is so many roadworks going on. That also needs to be taken into consideration when we are actually planning roadworks, that the local authorities and the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the local operators are all included in that discussion, because so we can actually then make suitable adjustments to those routes or to those timetables. But at the moment, you will see 3 buses stood in the traffic because all the due to 3 or 4 roadworks from Bradford all the way to Leeds. You know, you've got Branch, you've got Cockshot Lane, and those are the major points. And then if you have a little bit on the Pudsey junction, you've got nowhere to go. So therefore, so the real-time information is also important, because we're going to be spending a lot of money on the real-time, and that needs to be actually better coordinated by the operators and the information that we are sending out. Because the customer, if they miss 1 bus, 2 buses, 3 buses, they're not going to come back the day after. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Salam. So you just alarmed the officers by doing like 3 items on the agenda in one speech there. But all very important points, and I think we'll pick up those again later if that's okay as well, in the Leeds City Region Transport update and the summary of transport schemes as well. Yep. Councillor Buckley then, and Councillor Scullion, were you indicating? You're just pointing at Councillor Buckley in a non-offensive way. Go on.
Yep, thank you, Chair. And it was 2 points. And firstly, which Councillor Scullion mentioned a little bit earlier on and picked up by others, about this, for instance, on page 20, it mentions the core routes. And without wishing to be parochial, my ward, Alwoodley, and then Harewood, and then Wetherby, are in outer north-east of Leeds. And Wetherby is a long way from Leeds. It's a town in its own right. Nevertheless, it's part of the city. But every single map that we see about buses or other forms of transport, they're missed off. They're off the map. Alwoodley kind of just squeezes in, but these are off in, at the outer margins. And the word core just seems to suggest that it's inner city only. So that's just one point I'd like to make. But then a second, and in a way it's a minor thing, but it is on the papers about customer service. And I think there is more to be done with some of the drivers, obviously not the ones which happen to be in this meeting, obviously. But I caught the bus the other morning, the express from Alwoodley Lane, and I gave him the wrong card. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and I gave him the, whatever it's called, the wrong card. And he said to me, well, that's the wrong card, you can't use it now. I said, oh, hang on, I've given you the wrong one, and I gave him the Wyker card. And he looked at it and he said, it's out of date. I said, oh, right, OK, how much is it? He said, £3.80. So I gave him a £10 note, and he said, we can't change that. And I just thought, well, it was a little bit of a classic film, if you like, as to how not to treat the customer. Small point, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm sure all the operators have comprehensive complaints policies if you want to take that up with them. But I think most bus drivers that I come across are quite good at customer service, or they've had a very trying time, of course, for the last 18 months. And of course, we have a bus driver nodding vigorously at the back. The definition of core, I think, Dave.
Yes, if I can clarify that for Councillor Buckley and other members. It gets back to the point we were talking about earlier about the turn up and go services. We're trying to present the frequent bus services, the ones that do run every 10 minutes, almost like like you would a tram network or another type of mass transit, so that people actually recognises where a bus goes, because one of the things we do need to do to get people back onto bus is to actually make it easier for people who don't habitually use them to actually see them. That's why we've done the colour-coded route services in Leeds initially, and we'll do that in the rest of West Yorkshire. Unfortunately, what that means is that not all services are that frequent, and therefore services such as the ones who go to Wetherby aren't on that map because they're not that frequent. So I think one of the aspects of the network development plan we have in this bus service improvement plan is to look at some places like Wetherby and say, well, actually, how do we get them on the map? How do we get a more frequent service so that people can turn up and go to catch a bus from Wetherby into Leeds without having to plan their journey around 2 half-hourly services to go in different routes, which is how it is now. So I think there's an element of how we look at expanding that convenient type of bus service into wider areas. I think the wider point at Councillor Slam made, which I'll just touch on, real-time information. We do have an extensive real-time information system, but it relies upon the data being kept up to date, which we do. But as we often find, particularly through the pandemic and the current situations around the driver shortages, if bus service timetables change very frequently, then keeping on top of that data is quite a challenge, which we try to do. But if the system hasn't got the up to date, knowing where the bus actually is on the road at any one time, then it'll display the scheduled time rather than the 3 minutes or 2 minutes.
Which I think is the issue. So I think we've identified that as councillors before, that we need to look at that and see if we can get some more timely information in there. There's no point in having the technology if it's not fed with the right information. So it's RERO, isn't it? Rubbish in, rubbish out. So there's no point in having that. If there's more accurate information, let's use it. Councillor Bolt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just looking to the future on this, the work stream, the key part of the report, in Para 2.10 on page 19. Could we see about populating this with some measurable timelines so that we can come back and review how we're doing against these, and also to ensure that the baseline is clearly determined? Because when we're talking about having a 5-year network plan and developing that, what point are we starting from for that 5-year plan? One of the things on network design, which I've made before, it's not just the rural areas that are excluded. If you want to travel from Huddersfield bus station to Leeds, there isn't a direct service route. So it takes you, and I've said it before, I think Taj mentioned it at the start of the meeting, I think having cycled in, I think you came faster than the bus on the way in. And I've said that I could come from Murfield into Leeds faster on a push bike than a service bus. And whilst that's great for me, other people, it means they're excluded. It's a longer journey. So we need to look at that encouragement of that. So timelines and the baselines. And also, we're talking about the bus priority. I don't know if the operators look at schemes which are being designed, because the £77 million Cooper Bridge scheme, as it is at the moment, is reliant on transponders or whatever on the buses. There's no bus priority to get them to the Cooper Bridge roundabout, which means that if the bus is stuck in the traffic, as it often is on Leeds Road coming out of Huddersfield when there's a match or anything else like that, we're not going to encourage people to get onto the bus. when they're queuing in the traffic. There's got to be genuine priority and passage to get that, because we get the situation Taj mentioned where you get 3 buses all queued up behind each other, and you go, well, and those are empty because people are occupying cars for convenience. And again, network and connectivity, I think it's probably a Kirklees level thing, and the bus operators to liaise with Huddersfield Town and Huddersfield Giants. Why, if fans will catch a bus to go to an away match, why don't they catch a bus to go to a home match? It's ridiculous that we see so many traffic jams, because that affects, I think, the bus operators were talking at one time about diverting buses or stopping them on match days because they were stuck in the traffic. The business model would be to encourage those people and work with the stadium at Huddersfield and do workplace travel planning, if you like.
Yep.
You've got a capacity of 24,600 people.
Yeah.
How can we get those on public transport?
Thank you. So a few issues there, I think, Councillor Bolt. Obviously, bus priority corridors, as we talked about earlier in the meeting, actually is part of the bid that we've just put in, very important for us. Councillor Groves, you wanted to come back on?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I wanted to come back on, because certainly that does open at Ellen Road, so I'd be surprised if operators are missing a commercial opportunity to, get those people onto the buses. In terms of what Councillor Salam was talking about and Councillor Bolt, the operators have been more involved over the past sort of 18 months than they've ever been with districts to make sure that it's all planned well. It was a huge learning curve when the lip-tip funding arrived in Leeds, and the sequencing and the phasing of schemes did have an impact. So our officers are looking at what's being phased and how we sequence that right across the region so we don't have those knock-on effects. But once and we've never had as much investment in bus priority corridors and the transforming cities. So the infrastructure to people is really difficult to manage because, their expectations are higher that we shouldn't be doing these roadworks, but they want the better journey times. For instance, this morning, now that the lip tip is finally coming to fruition, we've just been talking to somebody in Wyker this morning. It used to take her an hour to get to work. Now got a bus priority corridor in from Rothwell to Leeds. It's taken her 15 minutes this morning. And there's the difference, and that's what we need to keep promoting. In terms of KPIs and measurements of this bus improvement plan, that's something that Dave and the team are working with. But you're quite right, Martin, we don't feed it back enough. Only yesterday, we all get so busy, I asked, right, where are we on the young people's ticket? Because actually this committee has worked incredibly hard, and Dave and his team to get that over the line. First came back and said the under-19s up to 90% take-up going back on the buses. So we've still got more to do on that, but we need to be celebrating those things, and we need to continue the comms around all these things. There's a lot of work going on in the background, but there's a lot to do.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Councillor Eric, first, can I ask you to come briefly, because obviously we're running a little bit late on this.
I will be brief. I can't let it pass the mention of the wonderful scheme at Cooper Bridge, which has been rumbling on for how many years, Martin? I think you were only a youth when that started. There's a lack of space. We would love to have a bus priority scheme in there. The first thing I asked, by the way, when I got this new post, is let's have a look at Cooper Bridge and where is the bus priority. There is no space at all, unfortunately, to put it there. It's a very, very busy junction. If there were space, I assure you, it would be there. So we're highly dependent on the signalling and the things that you mentioned that they do, transponders that they do put in buses, Martin. But I'm sure you will look forward to work with me on finding a wonderful solution for Cooper Bridge.
And this is part of the challenge, isn't it, that all these things we want to put in, mass transit, cycle routes, pedestrian walkways, bus priority corridors, all require quite a lot of road space. And in some places, and I'm looking at Calderdale, is obviously particularly difficult because of all those hills. Our topography is quite a challenge. But anyway, we all have the ambition to achieve that. So obviously, bus service improvement plan, then, we've all had a good go at that, both in this meeting and also in the previous meeting where we had a workshop on it. Can you take those comments back?
I can, thank you, Chair. It's quite useful feedback. And just to reassure Councillor Bolt and the other members, what we set out in this report on 210 was really just a flavour of the thinking. The plan will have timelines, it'll have targets and key performance indicators and all the things you would expect it to have.
We like numbers. Lovely. So we're noting that report, I believe, aren't we? I'm just checking. Yeah. Oh, and endorsing. So we do need to do that. Can I see people endorsing the approach we have, notwithstanding the comments we've made today? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. Thank you for that. So moving on now to transport decarbonisation. And the government have published a paper in June 2021, which is great news. We've all been waiting for that for some time, haven't we, really? Dave, is it Dave? Are you? Oh, James, you're presenting on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the committee with an update on transport decarbonisation policy work at the West Yorkshire, North of England and national levels. At a West Yorkshire level, the Combined Authority declared a climate emergency in June 2019 and at the same time committed the region to being net zero carbon by 2038 with significant progress by 2030. The Combined Authority will consider the West Yorkshire Climate and Environment Plan at its meeting next month in October, which, if approved, will be the Mayor's and West Yorkshire's response to the climate and environmental emergencies. This report also outlines our work on developing a full business case for a zero-emission bus regional area bid for submission by the end of January 2022. Also included as an appendix is the West Yorkshire response to the Transport for the North's Decarbonisation Plan consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So this is obviously wide-ranging in terms of different modes of transport that they're talking about. Something we've been waiting for a while. Good to see and hear about the increasing clean fleet we've got in our buses across the region. But obviously there's more planned to do, isn't there? And some districts are not as advanced as others, and that's no fault of the council themselves, but obviously just something the bus operators need to do conjointly with funding. So I've got Councillor Homewood first. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just going to be on the point that you were making there about the discrepancies, I guess, with the different authorities and what we're achieving in terms of the bus fleets and the efficiency and reduction in emissions. And I noticed in the report about the zebra scheme, which I presume is going to mean that we can do more to kind of equalise that. Hopefully, and I would be interested to see how we're going to achieve that at a Kirklees level, what changes we can make. And I think particularly as well, I don't know if this is something that we can discuss at future sub-committee meetings, because I think one of the things that is interesting to me when I've talked to officers before things is that, you know, in some of the buses that we have, for example, the electric buses, the challenges using those in certain topographies, length of journeys and things. And I think it's helpful for the public to understand how that works and how the technology is changing. So yeah, I just welcome to see something being parochial from a Kirklees level that just explains what our journey is on that and how we can improve our position there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. I know that's something that Councillor Groves has particularly championed, actually, Kirklees and the bus. Would you want to say a little?
Yeah, because when the zebra bid come forward, there was only 2 million in for Kirklees, and you have got the lowest buses converted. So we put in another 2 million for yourselves and Calderdale to take it up to 4 million. You've got the Team Pennine buses that have just launched. I think what we're struggling with, and we've spoken to officers at Kirklees, and Councillor Firth being in the call, is how we get the resource into districts to decide what type of power we're going to be using. Is it hydrogen? You know, is it electric? And while you're doing these new bus stations, I think there's an opportunity for us to have that wider discussion of what we do. So I think there's a lot of work to do around Kirklees. It is resource, so I think Councillor Firth would agree.
I mean, we're transitioning to a new way of doing transport, aren't we now? And I think it's the jury's still out about electric and how far can it go. We've obviously talked already about a lot of rural communities. We've got a vast rural landscape across the region. Councillor.
I just wonder if it's... I went to the opening of Sturton Park and Ride yesterday, which is amazing, first zero carbon, park and ride in the country. But speaking to the teams, and obviously I've been on a journey with them because it's my ward, there's a lot of best practice we can take and we could put into the new bus stations going forward. So I wondered if it's worth a visit for either the Transport Committee or district chairs to meet the teams, learn about the best practice and how that's been implemented and what costs have been made, going forward, saved going forward. I think that would be useful.
Yeah, it's a good example, isn't it?
Excellent.
And it just shows we are making great progress, really. Yeah. It's inspiring. Hopefully other parts of the country do likewise.
Yeah. And the Minister did mention the zebra bid for West Yorkshire, so hopefully that's a good sign.
Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. It was reference the Transport for the North Decarbonisation Consultation. And at 216, it mentions near zero emissions by 2045. This is a secondary point, really, but we're here 2045, 2038, 2050, 2030, depending on whether you're talking to West Yorkshire, Leeds, or whoever it is. But the point I wanted to make was that directly below that, it states in the report, van travel must reduce by 10%, which is interesting considering that everybody's ordering everything from the internet now.
Which page are you looking at, just for everybody's purposes?
29. And then at the top of the following page, it says that the share of large cars, such as sports utility vehicles, must drop from a given percentage to a lower percentage. And these might well be laudable aims, but how on earth can they actually be brought about?
In my experience, regional, national organisations set targets, and us as councillors have to figure out how it works at local level, and we actually do the delivery. I've always think that's something of our strength, that we actually make things happen as local councillors, and I'm sure we're up for the challenge. But Councillor Groves, did you want to come back in again? Would you want to make that point? I'll go to Dave, or James, in fact.
I think in terms of Transport for the North, I'm slightly disappointed with the report, if I'm honest, because it talks about the strategy. We've been talking about decarbonisation for a long time now. It doesn't talk about specific actions. It gives timetables, as Councillor Buckley has said. But if it's really to be achieved, they've got to work with the local rail teams I know they're engaged with. I think there's a pushback to government for more money to be devolved for us to get on with our own decarbonisation plan. Because if we've got to move HGVs, and I know that we had a visit from the ports, then we've got to move quickly to get new lines in between Hull and Wakefield and build consolidation centres. And in places like Caldertail, they talked about moving freight in and out, and Wakefield having those same conversations. But this is all about Transport for the North, and I'm not quite sure where the actions are. The strategy's there, but where are the actions, and how does it all work together? The other thing that I'm disappointed on is we've been talking, and this committee for a long time have discussed, we've got all these road schemes in the Transport Fund that are possibly not going to be built, not going to be fit for purpose in a new world. I want our officers to continue or push even harder to have those discussions with government if they're really truly committed to this agenda. And I spoke about this yesterday because we've got people with the highest respiratory conditions in Leeds living in our areas, and children presenting constantly with asthma. If they're really committed to this agenda, they would devolve us the funding to do this, and they would let us reallocate funding, not to build roads where we don't need to build them, but to encourage that modal shift off-road, and for us to reallocate that funding to public services and make a real difference, whether that's on lower fares, I don't know, but there's just got to be a big piece of work. Everybody's talking, but it's the doing, and we've done a lot because the Sturton Park and Ride, it was amazing to open that up yesterday, but we've got so much more to do.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. I mean, certainly it's a similar point to the Councillor Buckler was making, really, that if this is a strategy, but there's a how, isn't it, really? I guess the question to officers is, you know, obviously there's a consultation here, so the Mayor will be feeding into that, and obviously it's part of Transport for the North as well. Can we be assured that some of those views will be expressed at that level?
Come back. Yeah, well, I think the short answer is absolutely yes. I think, just referring to Councillor Buckley's question there about on page 29, the sort of wording "must" in relation to van, you know, sort of travel reduction and large car sort of use reduction. I think that language is referring to if we want to meet the 2038 zero carbon target, then what the evidence is suggesting, all the work that we've done, including with yourselves around the decarbonisation pathways, is that that's the sort of quantum of change. I'm afraid I don't have a sort of miracle answer as to how, but I'm sure colleagues have got some good ideas. But that's the scale of the challenge, I think. In relation to Councillor Grove's point about more doing rather than talking, clearly that's hugely important. And on, I think, paragraph 217, TFN are using the decarbonisation work in relation to their investment programme prioritisation. At the moment, I guess TFN are still sort of quite a junior sort of in terms of their development level of delivery. They're still quite a young organisation. I'm not entirely sure exactly what schemes they have delivered on the ground yet, but as you know, Councillor Groves, we're working with them closely on a number of different programmes, including things like Northern Powerhouse Rail, so we'll see where that gets to over the coming months and years.
Thank you. Of course, they need the financing to be able to deliver those big projects, don't they? And they've got specific money to deliver NPR, but probably not for some of the other priorities that you're talking about there. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come in and support the comments of Councillor Groves there. I think the scale of the challenge that we're facing shouldn't be underestimated. We aren't looking at accelerating a downward trend. We're looking at actually turning the curve and turning it downwards in a situation where for the past 5 years I think transport emissions haven't gone down but they've remained, and there has been some local action to help ameliorate that, but it's going to take a significant step change, and I think that local councils and the combined authority have shown leadership in terms of the ambition that it set out, and I feel that sometimes Transport for the North and DFT are behind us on that. But that won't be acceptable in terms of us meeting the scale of this challenge. A lot of the things that we need to be developing, if we want to hit some of the milestones in here around 2030 and 2038, they need to be getting built now. They need to be getting planned out now. It's not a time to be going back and rewriting things. We need to be having things in the pipeline as soon as possible if we are going to get anywhere near those. One of the things that really stood out for me in this report, and it's one of the things that government announced recently, was the phasing out of petrol and diesel cars by 2030, I understand. Just trying to wrap my head around the scale of change that will require in terms of electrical charging point infrastructure, whether that's in our town and city centres or whether it's in our residential areas. I don't have a drive. I don't know how that's going to work for me. I don't know how it'll work for a lot of my residents as well. But we need to find a solution, and I think that government and Transport for the North need to give us the powers and the money so that we can make those actions happen.
Hear, hear, Councillor Sutherland. So more unring-fenced money to the region, because we know what we're doing on this and we know how to deliver it. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is on 2.29, and I'm just looking at the Euro 6 fleet that we have in West Yorkshire. I'm delighted that Leeds have 83% of Euro 6 buses. I really am. But then I look down and see Kirklees at 43%, and then Calderdale at 53%. We are very much the poor relations, it seems, and we're not best served by the bus companies. And Kim has mentioned it earlier that she did bid for some more money successfully. 2 million, that'll get about 8 buses, I think. But it's not good enough, and I'd like to know what we as a collective are going to do about these appalling statistics. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So again, it's government money is investing, doesn't it, in some of these new buses as well. In Bradford, obviously, there's going to be a clean air zone. There's some money coming with that to for bus operators to purchase those. But it is clear that the zebra may not go as far as it needs to go.
We put you up to 4 million. We put 4 million in for Kirklees and Caldale. The Leeds figure, I think it's fair to say, unfortunately the trolley bus didn't come off, but the 173 million was retained, that helped them do a partnership with First. I don't know if you want to come in, Dave. So a significant amount of their fleet has come from that fund.
Yeah, I think it is probably worth just dwelling on why Kirklees and Calderdale are outliers in these numbers, and I think there's two main factors there, probably three. Firstly, as Councillor Groves is saying, Leeds has had an injection of new buses as part of the deal with the bus companies in response to the investment in bus priority and bus infrastructure in the city that was part of the Leeds public transport investment programme, which is a little bit of a one-off. I think the second factor is that both Leeds and Bradford, with their clean air zone aspirations, attracted funding which directed a lot of money towards retrofitting midlife buses to meeting the Euro 6 standards. So, and we've administered funds over the last couple of years to be able to do that, and we have prioritised the clean air zone areas because that's basically the terms and conditions of the money that we've got. I think, as Councillor Grove said, the task next is to say, well, actually, we want to keep doing some of that retrofitting, so at least we get some, the bus fleet up to a much sort of cleaner emission standard in the areas which we haven't done yet, which are the other three districts. So I think that's broadly the reason. I think the other challenge that sits around this is that the other underlying reason for that is the level of investment that the bus companies themselves are making in fleet replacement, and as evidenced by the Leeds arrangements, bus operators will tend to prioritise that to their profitable parts of the business, and so I think there is a lesson in that as well, that we're acutely aware of. But obviously the sort of economic effect of the pandemic on everything, including buses, it's got to be a factor there. I think the other thing we should just reflect on is the zebra bid's a good step forward in terms of bringing more electric buses in. It's been said earlier, this is still an unknown quantity as to how well electric buses will perform in some of our hillier areas. But if successful, it'd be great if the zebra bid's successful, but it will only address 10% of the West Yorkshire bus fleet. We will still have 80% of the West Yorkshire bus fleet as not zero carbon, so it's only a step rather than a leap, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Dave. So I've got Councillor Bolton, I've got Councillor Scullion. Can we just keep our comments short, because I'm just conscious of time?
Indeed, Chair, thanks. We've talked about what's in the report. What isn't in the report and needs to be for decarbonisation is sustainable and integrated transport. One of the easiest ways to reduce carbon emissions is to get more people on cycling, electric bikes and other modes similar to that, which then brings the need for those modes of transport. We talk about electric vehicle charging. If you want to cycle into work or something, you need the charging facilities in some cases when you get there to top it up, and also the infrastructure on the way. But one of the things that's been referred to is on page 29, the targets on 2.16. Van travel, again, the reduction must reduce by 10% to 2030, and similarly Hgvs. How then does that compare? If we're talking about must reduce vans by 10%, I understand Tingley has got a planning application for a major distribution warehouse, aka Amazon, as indeed has Cleckheaton Chain Bar, which borders on Bradford. So the implication of that is by having two major distribution schemes with huge numbers of HGVs in, huge numbers of vans out, unless those are carbon neutral vehicles, those Leeds and Kirklees in particular are going to see a huge increase in their carbon from that element, and we need to look at that. The other thing I think that should be taken into account is that the funding streams from West Yorkshire, if transport schemes, and I'll reference the A629 Huddersfield to Outlane, if that has a net minus effect for carbon, so by chopping a load of trees down, which absorb carbon and things, if that increases, even in the short term, the carbon figures, WICA should be looking at that and saying that's contrary to our policies, and we should be telling the authorities, you have to abide. I mean, we had the carbon reduction pathway, CRP, which is 21% reduction in cars. So if authorities are devising schemes to increase car usage but not reduce carbon, it's contrary to what we're doing, and there needs to be that dialogue, and if necessary, as government have done with schemes which are not complying, there needs to be a cap on schemes to make sure they're complying with the regional ambitions.
Thank you. And I think all 5 districts and York are united in trying to reduce car usage. We've all shared that target and we all work together to reduce it. So I don't think any of us are wanting to increase car usage at all, or just to reassure you of that. I'll bring Councillor Scullion in and then go back to Dave for a final mop-up on this item before we move on.
I just wanted to mention the dreaded pacer trains, because I think we're in danger, actually, of having an out-of-date bus fleet stock, which actually is very much like the problem that we've worked on for years in terms of getting rid of pacer trains. So I would very much support the Chair in what she said earlier in terms of devolve the money to us. Let's work with WICA and the district councils and the bus operators and actually keep the pressure up in terms of modernising that fleet. We don't want to see years, as we did with the pacer trains, of pushing to have our transport stock updated.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. And certainly, I mean, government have told us, directed us, we have to have a clean air zone to get compliant by the end of 2022. So they're not giving us any wriggle room. We've got to do it. So, you know, why we have to bid into Zebra funding to get clean buses when we know we need the money as a region, I really don't know. They just need to devolve the money, as you say, so we can get on and deliver it. So I'm just concluding that item there. I'll just bring in James and Dave to just to respond to those last couple of comments there.
Thank you, Chair. No, there's a lot of really helpful comments there, and we'll certainly be taking those back and working on that with colleagues, so thank you very much.
Thank you. One thing I just want to emphasise is it looks like we need to feed back to Transport for the North that they need some practical actions in there. It's not just a strategy. It needs to be practical. We need to be able to do what they're saying, not just
we can take that from this committee and report that back to colleagues in Transport for the North. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's for noting, therefore. Lovely. So moving on now to the next item, which is rail strategy. The Mayor has obviously got a West Yorkshire rail strategy group together, which is good. James, do you want to start this item?
Thank you, Chair. So this report updates the committee on the work to secure a stronger voice for West Yorkshire with the railway, including through the mayoral-led Strategic Rail Partnership, as well as through the completion of the West Yorkshire Rail Strategy. The strategy will build on the Rail Vision, which was published for consultation as part of the Connectivity Infrastructure Plan earlier this year. Members of this committee provided a very valuable contribution to the development of the Rail Vision, and initial analysis of the consultation responses has indicated a high level of agreement with the vision from stakeholders and members of the public. Outlined in the report are the proposed publication dates for chapters of the rail strategy, as well as a request for committee members of this committee to be involved in the production of the strategy's chapters through targeted workshops over the autumn and winter. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Excellent. Does anybody want to say anything else? Obviously, Councillor Bolter suggests we move on to the next item. Lovely. Okay, thank you. If we'll move on then. Thank you very much, James, for that. So, obviously, we welcome all the work that the Mayor's doing on that. Very important we get everybody together. So, moving on now to transport network update. Now, we did comment on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, so I think it's probably worth, in your presentation, Dave, reflecting on the workforce issues that we've been talking about.
Yes, I'll do that, Chair. I had three things to say to this report. Obviously, the report itself it gives you quite a lot of facts and figures and information, and happy to answer questions on that. But I think three things emerge. We are seeing a short recovery from in terms of passenger use of public transport since schools went back at the beginning of this month, and the time lag a little bit with papers being published means that I think I mentioned earlier. I think we're looking at around about 65-ish% of what we would have seen in terms of bus passengers in the equivalent months in 2019 now. So there is some recovery. There's some return to commuting patterns in particular, and as I think as Councillor Grove said earlier as well, we're seeing a stronger return of younger people back to travelling predominantly to school and college by bus. So that's a good sort of healthy sign in one direction, but it's still not a major return of patronage, and the ongoing financial challenges that brings. I think the second thing I just wanted to point out before I get into the issues around workforce and drivers. We've included in your pack some details of the East Leeds Flexibus. It's been mentioned in the conversation earlier. Some slides in the pack of papers for you to look at. Happy to take questions. If you want to see the bus, we've got one parked out in Millennium Square as well. So there is a level of innovation in the East Leeds scheme. So that we are trying some things out here, particularly around the apps and the electric vehicles. So we will report in future times in terms of how that trial's going and what the learning is for things going forward. But I think we probably be useful for me to, and we allude to it in the paper, but I think in ensuing weeks, this is an issue that's sort of emerging even more, is the impact on service delivery regarding availability of bus drivers in particular and workforce issues. It is causing impact on passenger experience and some cancellations and some short notice changes. We do talk to bus operators to prioritise services towards journeys to school and to those communities where the bus frequency is less. And so if buses do need to come off the road, they're probably better taken out of the more frequent services than the infrequent services. At the moment, we in response to requests Councillor Groves you mentioned earlier, and we've been sort of gathering some information in the last couple of days. I think across West Yorkshire, I think the establishment is 10% short in terms of its drivers, and that's around about 250 drivers across all the companies in West Yorkshire. So it gives you a bit of a flavour of where that is, and the bus industry does have staff turnover, and variously, and it is a bit of a fluctuating piece, and always has been, and does change with how the economy ebbs and flows as well. But bus companies would expect a staff turnover of between 5 and 15%. They're seeing double that at the moment, so there's something real happening here, and I think, as Councillor Salam and others have said, there's some underlying issues around working practice and things like that. But the jobs market is buoyant. We're all familiar with the HGV issues, and clearly people moving around, driving jobs quite a lot at the moment, for the variety of different ways in which the economy is impacting on driving and goods supply as well as passenger services. The pandemic still having an effect on workforces across all industries, with sickness, with isolation being, and people isolating because of sickness, leading to higher sickness levels. And it's triggered some people to change their personal circumstances and change their employment. I think sitting on top of that, there are some delays in licensing and testing that are challenging around this, and particularly makes it more difficult for the bus industry and the HGV industry to get new people into the industry. So there's a big turnover of people with driving licences, but getting new people licensed is a challenge. We've talked to bus operators about what they're doing about this, and obviously and we talked and flagged earlier about the longer term impacts and thoughts around working practices. The bus operators are run heavy recruitment campaigns. Some are offering signing on bonuses and things like that to bring people in, to encourage people to join. I was talking to one of the operators yesterday, and he was saying, one of the challenges is by the time people sort of sign up to wanting to come and work as a bus driver for that company, the time it takes for them to get a licence and then get their test, they go off and get another job. So, I think that's an endemic problem with this, to bring new people in. So there is an engagement at national level with the government and DVLA on it, and steps have been taken to make the most out of the driver availability that they've got. But unfortunately, that is leading to service impacts, and some operators are registering a lower level of service whilst this goes on. I think the big question really is, at what point can we stabilise this? We talked earlier in the meeting about plans to get more people on buses, to improve the bus service, but in the meantime we're actually sort of working our way through difficulties both in driver availability and in the financial impacts of the lower numbers of passengers at the moment. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions. But I thought it was useful to update the committee on what is a bit of an emerging issue, and I think it's going to be the issue of the autumn, and hopefully just the autumn.
Thank you, Dave. I think it's important for us just to stress, though, that we do not accept a reduction in services for operators. I think we need to really challenge on that, because obviously there's never been a higher level of public subsidy into commercial operators.
Absolutely.
And we do expect a decent service for our residents. We
do, and I think one of the things is we do challenge it. We also need to be pragmatic in terms of minimising the effect. If it has to happen, then we need to be able to do it in a managed way that minimises the impact on people. But absolutely, there is a value for public money issue around this. If the service cannot be provided, then there's an issue around paying for it as well.
And I think there's a long-term investment that needs to go into staffing. And we all need to be involved in that, I think, with the operators, to make sure that we know there's talent in our respective districts, and they need to be accelerated into these
I think so, and I think one of the things that this does tell us is, as a combined authority, the wider responsibilities in terms of economic development and workforces and skills, is that we probably need to give a little bit more focus into the transport industry than perhaps has been the case in previous years, and I think that's an emerging issue that we're very aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt, I'll bring you in. I've got something else, but to bring you in first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We've talked about driver issues a lot, and mention has been made of Hgv Drivers Shortage. I know colleagues will find it hard to believe, but I've had an Hgv licence for 46 years. The facilities and circumstances now for Hgv drivers are no better than when I used to drive 20 years ago. Yeah, I would ask that we look regionally about what is provided in our region for overnight stops for lorry drivers. Eric will know the situation at Dewsbury, where Kirklees, I think it's charged either £10 or £12 a night just to park up on a piece of tarmac in a compound that hasn't even got a toilet. Now, we wouldn't tolerate taking money and providing circumstances like that, and particularly as we've gone through the pandemic, where lorry drivers have found it harder to find places to eat. We're reduced to people parking up on the side of the road again, which is not good for them when they've got to get up the next morning and drive an HGV. It's not good for the security in this kind of thing. So can we have a look and probably set up, if we need to, as an exemplar for West Yorkshire? Other areas, and it used to be when I was driving, you had places like Chesterfield, Carlisle and Penrith that had truck stops. Secure compounds where you could get a shower, get a meal, watch the telly or whatever. But in this day and age, if West Yorkshire hasn't got at least one truck stop within its region, I think it's something that we, as an authority, need to look at, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good suggestion that I'd not thought of. Anybody else on this item? Councillor Homewood.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. Just looking at the bus update and the train update, I noticed that in this report and in other reports, we get a lot of information about where the usage is as opposed to pre-COVID levels. And I'm just trying to wonder from this point, how useful is that information, and should we be looking at that differently to understand, you know, the points that we're making about the need for services and what the usage figures mean and where we expect them to be? Because to me, you know, if you're on a busy commuter service, you know, if that's 70% as before, that's probably above capacity already, because people were already sort of sardined into those services. But also we know that people may be using services at different times and things. So I suppose when we're looking at where services might change, we need to have that strong argument to say, well, there might be 20% less, but these services are critical because they're already to capacity, or they're providing a service at a weekend or whatever, which is where the increase is. So I just wondered if there's in the future more information we can have about that and what we expect for the future, rather than just comparing to pre-pandemic levels, which I presume we're never going to get back to exactly the same usage as it was then. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent point, Councillor Howard, and I think I'm particularly keen that operators don't make decisions now about how the bus services and bus routes are going to work forever in the future based on what happens now, because I don't think we're yet at full capacity to get back to normal, whatever normal is, are we? We don't know what normal is now yet, and therefore I wouldn't want them to make decisions about routes just now based on figures before and after. You're right, there needs to be a longer time frame to see what the actual trend is and not just judge it on a pandemic.
Yeah, I think it is a really good point, and whilst we're using comparing with 2019 as a bit of a shorthand, just to see, we've been doing it all the way through the pandemic, really, just to see how the effect the pandemic's having on passenger numbers. But I think it's a really good point, because sitting underneath that is the fact that travel patterns are different, and we do absolutely need to understand the different travel patterns. I think one of the things that going forward, hopefully as the pandemic sort of resolves itself as being some material impact on bus use, is that I think we can expect the peaks to spread across the day, for example. So people will travel more at different times than all piling on at the morning and evening. That wouldn't be a bad thing. And we're seeing this a little bit now, and we've seen it particularly on the railways actually now. But also understanding which routes are stronger, because one of the other interesting things that you see in the pandemic is that some of our towns and cities, bus patronage actually returned stronger than others, and it's the places that rely particularly on office-based commuters that are performing the weaker, and that might be a long-term thing if some of those people spend some of their time working at home.
Thank you. I'm going to Councillor Groves, and I think the other issue just to mention is about the reliability and punctuality. I know you had a point.
Yeah, definitely. But I think with the connectivity strategy and mass transit, we've got to invest some work to be done to actually make the business case as well for demand management on what that looks like in different areas, because it will be very different in different geographies. And I think we need to look at what the future customer looks like as well. Where is that future customer? one of the big things for me that's come out over these past couple of years and before COVID was across every district that I went to, I was told that the people cannot get to hospitals and doctors' surgeries in all the communities. So I think, you know, with all the appointments that the hospitals are going to be behind, we're going to have to react pretty quickly if we want to get people out of cars and we want to get them to them anchor organisations. And that's when I would talk about the new modelling. And hopefully there are some operators that are already thinking that way. But that demand management piece needs doing in every district on different modes as well.
Thank you. And we just need to make sure that from a roadworks point of view, everything's joined up. That was the other.
So we've got our delivery team looking at that and putting some phasing around that because, yeah, there's some big infrastructure projects going in. Could have a significant impact.
Lovely. Thank you. Right. So just on that item then, obviously there's the Flexibus. Do go and see it on your way out if you've not seen it already. There's a good bit of innovation there that we'd like to see be successful. With that, I think we just note that report, don't we?
Yes,
but obviously,
Chair.
there's some quite significant issues there to address going forward in terms
There
of
are, and
our work
obviously
with bus
we will
operators.
keep Transport Committee members aware of developing situations, but I thought it was useful to share with you today.
Thank you. So next is Leeds City Region transport updates, and this is Councillor Buckley sort of alluded to a few of the big issues in here at the start of the meeting. He may want to pick up on that, but who's doing this? Is this you, Dave? Can't read your writing.
I think James and I will take questions. This is
let's start with Councillor Buckley.
This is our report where we sort of give you update on everything else. Basically.
Councillor Buckley, do you want to just sort of emphasise your points you made? And maybe
well, I think, as I was saying earlier on, the kind of elephants in the room, really, which were the uncertainty over the eastern leg of HS2, the situation with the airport, the implications for HS2 station work in the city here, and East Coast Main Line, the whole lot of it, really. There are so many uncertainties, and if we can have any clarification on any of them, it would be a help.
Thank you. So we'd love to know when the IRP is out, Integrated Rail Plan, if you've got any insight to that. James, is that you?
I wish I knew. My suspicion is it'll be around the time of the comprehensive spending review. So hopefully the wait will be over by the end of October. What I would say, though, whatever the outcome of the integrated rail plan, West Yorkshire has connectivity needs external to West Yorkshire, so across the north and across the country, and they remain real and present. So however the integrated rail plan ends up, and whatever it says, we need to be really clear as to whether or not what's in it meets our connectivity needs.
So we have some big ticket items for us in the region, which Neil will, if we get them, we will be able to catch up our productivity challenge. So HS2, Northern Powerhouse Rail, full delivery of transparent upgrade, all really significant for our region. On the East Coast Main Line timetabling, I wanted them to postpone it because actually there's quite a lot of capital expenditure that needs to go on so that we can actually make sure we don't get a detriment. And they were very, very fixed, East Coast Main Line, going how to get from London to Scotland quickly, but there's us in the middle who need servicing well. So I think we now have an opportunity to speak to government about what capital expenditure needs to go on at our stations and lines in between to make sure that any timetable changes are not of detriment but actually of improvement to our region. So pleased to see that at least. The key route network consultation that government is doing, I'm not sure how aware district councillors are of that, Steve.
Yes, that's something the government's seeking views on. I don't know whether members will recall, but the devolution arrangements gives the mayoral combined authority some powers over a sort of strategic network of roads, and I think the feedback that the Combined Authority will give back to government is that we're in the early stages of working through that and developing partnership arrangements with district council highways teams to manage the roads in that way. So I think our response essentially is that we've got a model that we're going to make work in the devolution deal. I think the plan is for the response to the government consultation to come back to yourselves as members probably sometime next week.
So I'm quite keen, obviously, as a leader of one of the Combined Authority Councils, to make sure that we continue the relationship with the Combined Authority as one of equals, and therefore any changes to key route networks need to be done with consent, and we should never be done to as councils, because obviously that won't work as a relationship. And I know the Mayor is of the same opinion. It's a family of councils and not a hierarchical situation, though. Councillor Bolt, quickly.
Yeah, just a quick point to highlight something on page 117, talking about LNER services and the potential Huddersfield to London service, which obviously has constraints, being a once daily service and is one where you travel to Leeds and then sit in your carriage while it's dropped off and picked up. The report says that in practice it would be quicker to travel on TP or Northern and change at Leeds. I make no apologies for saying no, it wouldn't. If you're in Huddersfield or Dewsbury and you want a quick service to London, you can come to Murfield and get on Grand Central. It's an adequate service running several times, and I've used it to go down to Whitehall on council business. So there's no need for everybody to come into Leeds. Other services are available, Chair.
If you get on the service at Bradford, it takes you an hour and a half to get to Doncaster on Grand Central. So that is rather lengthier than the East Coast Main Line option. So I'm sure you appreciate that we need both, we can't just rely on one.
Just on that point, it's whole journey times. If you leave Bradford and travel to Leeds, change trains and go to London, it's whole journey times. Because I had this when I went down with David Sheard when he was the leader of the council, and now then chief exec who lived in Huddersfield. They went to Wakefield. My journey time, getting on the 7:30 Grand Central, was quicker than them having to schlep into Wakefield Westgate.
Well, it's not from Bradford, that's all I can say. Anyway, we're just, where are we on that? Leeds City Region Transport Update. So basically, we are a bit in limbo at the moment with the IRP outstanding. It's difficult for us to comment any further on those major schemes that we need, but we will make sure we lobby, and I think all of us collectively lobby on those improvements that we need to see and those investments we need to see. It's going to be truly transformational for our districts and our region if we get the investment we need, and we know the value of money in the region, and we'll make sure it goes a long way indeed. So, sorry, Councillor Rees, did you want to say something? You keep looking at me. No, just looking at me. That's all right. Summary of transport schemes. We have a summary there, and that is the only thing I would pick up in there was about the Councillor Salah mentioned about real-time information technology earlier, which is also referenced in this report.
It is, and the reference in this report is to a new sort of back office system, which will hopefully improve both the reliability of the service, but also enable us to give data feeds from that system into other providers, and we're already beginning to do that now. So, that enables that data to be presented, for example, on Google Maps and other things. So, there's some definite benefits that come out of that.
I think we just need some reassurance that actually we're getting the most up-to-date data.
It is. I mean, it is. We can buy as much technology as we like, but and we do have a system of bringing the data in, but when services change quite frequently, then we're sort of playing to catch up a little bit with that. The other thing it relies upon is his bus operators keeping it up to date, and particularly under the current circumstances, if a bus is cancelled, there's a facility on that system to make it cancelled, and then the customers know that it's not in the system, because the signs on the street will say that.
Lovely. Councillor Slum?
Thank you, Chair. I think you're absolutely right, Dave, that, unless, I mean, the technology can only pick up what you feed into it. And if it's not up-to-date, real-time information, then it's just going to go on the schedule's time. But one of the things that I do actually know is that most of the operators do have real-time information for themselves, because they know exactly where that bus is. I mean, where the satellite picks the bus. So if the bus is travelling down the road, they know exactly when it's hitting certain points. That's real time, because they can actually see that bus going. Because if that bus is being delayed, they can actually then, stagger those buses if they wish to do so, because they don't want to actually, get 3 buses together. That's been their effort. So that, to me, is more real-time information. If we can get something like that or tap into that, because many times I do drive, just like Councillor Bolt, I've got a PCV licence for the last 34 years, and I do drive sometimes on the road, and I'll pull up into on the bus stop, and I'm 7 minutes early, but it's still saying that the bus is going to be here in 15 minutes. Because, for one thing or the other, I might be 5 or 6, 7 minutes early because I haven't picked up, or I've hit the traffic lights at the right time. But it still says on the rail time, the bus is going to be here in 15 minutes. It doesn't say the bus is here. This is the bus, this is that bus that you are looking at on the rail time. That's what I'm saying. I know it's going to take a bit of effort. I know it's going to take a bit of planning to make sure that the passengers get real-time information, and that's what I was trying to highlight.
Yeah, just to reassure members, 2 things that Councillor Salam said. Firstly, yes, some operators subscribe to data feeds which actually come from the real-time infrastructure which the Combined Authority and the taxpayer is funding through these projects. So that not all bus operators use that, but that's available. So it is all the same system. The bus running early and presenting that bus as running early is an interesting little dilemma. We probably don't have time to go into the whys and wherefores of what we should be saying if a bus is running ahead of its schedule. But it's a bit of an interesting illustration that you get into the weeds of these issues, and they are not quite as straightforward as it might seem. But I think the point Councillor Salam's absolutely correctly making is whatever we do, it's got to actually make sense to the customer.
Thank you. Thank you for raising the point. So, I think with that, we're just noting that report, I believe. The last item is Transport Committee review, which is something I think we've spoken about before at this committee. It's ongoing, of course. It's something that I've been tasked with doing because it's the only committee that wasn't looked at as part of the remit of the Mayoral Combined Authority, whereas the other committees of authority have been looked at and reviewed. So we're doing that this year. I know I've already spoken to a few around the room. I've got a few more conversations to have. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Dave?
No, I think we set out in the report the sort of terms of reference for the committee, what the role the committee is going forward. And I think as Councillor Hinchcliffe said, there's conversations that you're having with members. There's, as the report says, if people want to send emails to me, I can collate content as well for what we present back to the Combined Authority in early December. The plan being to finalise the review before the end of the calendar year, so that the process then the independent review body can look at allowances, and then we can make the changes for the new municipal year.
Thank you. And I'm happy, obviously, anybody who wants to pick up the phone to me to have a conversation. Councillor Groves?
Yeah, the one thing that I would say about the review, and obviously what we're going to be looking at in bus reform, rail reform, mass transit, key route network, multimodal, and all the things that we've been talking about today, after spending 3 years down at Wyker and visiting Liverpool and Manchester and all the other authorities, that you should be running in parallel a review of the teams, the resources and the structures that are needed to match how we're going to move forward, because if they're not in place, then I'm not quite sure how we're going to deliver everything that we've got to do at the combined authority with the resources that the teams have got. They're very, very fine. And I'll give you one for instance in terms of mass transit in Manchester, and we've got a handful of people working on it. They've got 128 people working on it. And you know, we've got different challenges. And I say that because I care about the resources right across West Yorkshire. And if the other, Leeds is obviously a big council, they've got more resources than the other districts, but actually we need to move forward together. So I think that point needs to be addressed, and I've not heard that conversation happening at Wyker. Okay, I don't know if Dave might want to correct me, but I've not.
No. Thank you, Councillor Gross. I absolutely agree with you about the resources needed. I mean, just to reassure a bit, the conversation from a leader's point of view is we're having that conversation across the whole region, and not just on transport, but everything really, about how we increase our capacity to deliver. If we want to catch up to other authorities which have had devolution and mayoral devolution before we have, then we also need to accelerate our delivery. And some of that pipeline development is really important if we want to get that money in from what government are increasingly doing, which is competing for funds nationally. So what they should be doing, as we've discussed earlier in the meeting, is actually devolving the funding for us to spend. But actually, if we need to have a beauty parade with some of these, then that resource into pipeline development is really important. So I think it's absolutely a very good point, well made. And the 5 authorities and Wyker are coming together in the next few weeks to talk about the resourcing of it all and to see how we can actually make sure that we've all got the relevant resource. As you say, some of us are better resource than others for significant schemes like this, and it's all growing pains, isn't it? Which is it's a good thing to have, actually, a good opportunity to have, that we're growing and we're trying to develop more projects and get more projects over the line, but of course we need the resources to do so. And earlier we talked about bus drivers and Hgv drivers, but can I say transport planners are actually quite hard to come by as well. So I know we've got some recruitment adverts out at the moment, haven't we? And so if anybody out there wants to come and join us, we're a nice team to work with.
We have, and just to echo Councillor Grove's point, I mean, we started the meeting talking about city region transport settlement, and to a certain extent, within that is the money to sort of start resourcing things like mass transit. But as Councillor Hinchcliffe says, yes, we do, and I think our council colleagues and other colleagues nationally likewise are facing recruitment difficulties. You know, as some of these things scale up, then there needs to be a supply of people to be able to do them, and not a never-ending sort of a procession of people moving jobs just to keep it. We've got seriously to look at how we bring people through a system so we do get more transport planners in the future.
And that's perhaps something we can look at in the future, isn't it, about the workforce development for the transport industry. I'm keen for every geography student to consider transport planning as a career option. I'm not sure they even know it exists when they leave university.
It is, and I think that's a bit of a theme for this morning, really, isn't it, in terms of workforce is key to all of these things.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for those. Anything else?
Chair, can I just confirm that for the rail strategy item, that we also approved the recommendation for members to be involved in the development going forward?
Yes, sorry, I thought we did that. Yes.
If we did, that's fine. Councillor Bolt
can
was
we
just a bit fast
for the record, can we say, are we happy for ourselves to be involved in that going forward? I think we probably are. Please, all those in favour. We like being involved.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I missed the opportunity earlier, but we've had all the stats about road transport, buses, cars, and emissions. What we didn't touch on was sustainable transport and how, coming out of this pandemic, because the government, going forward with all our schemes, the government put great weight on sustainable transport and cycling. Have we any stats on whether that's actually improved or decreased coming out of this pandemic.
We have some terrific. Just want to add that, ask that question, answer that question.
Yeah, in terms of active travel, walking, cycling, and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean we've got some statistics. Maybe perhaps that's something we can give a little bit more focus to in terms of the information to the next committee. Happy to take that away.
Lovely, important to us all. Lovely. With that, then, I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you.